Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into a bit of a paleontological puzzle. It centers on a dinosaur called Aepisaurus. Maybe not the most famous name out there.
That's right. And our whole exploration really is based on, well, pretty limited stuff. We're basically talking about a single humerus that's the upper arm bone found in France.
Not one bone. Serious.
That's the one, yeah.
And yet somehow it's enough to get people talking. It raises that question, doesn't it? How much can you really tell from, a single fossil fragment?
Exactly.
I mean, this isn't some big flashy skeleton in a museum. It's one piece. But apparently it's caused debate. It's still relevant somehow. Why is this obscure genus still worth digging into?
Well, I think it really shows the detective work involved in paleontology.
Yeah.
It's a perfect example of the challenge. Trying to piece together the past when you have hardly any pieces. So what we want to do today is look at the info we do have, understand how scientists have tried to classify this thing,
Right.
and maybe uncover some surprising details that make even this small find pretty interesting.
Okay, let's start with the name then. Aepisaurus. It sounds quite, well, grand.
It does. It comes from Greek. You've got epinos, which means something like lofty or high, and then sauros for lizard.
So lofty lizard.
Lofty lizard, exactly. It's kind of ironic, maybe, such a big name for something we know from so little actual bone.
Where did this lofty lizard bone actually turn up?
It was found near Bédouin, which is near Mont Ventoux in France, and this was way back 1841.
Wow, okay.
The finder was a chap named Prosper Renaud. But it took a while, until 1852, for the French paleontologist Paul Gervais to actually describe it properly and give it the name Aepisaurus based just on that humerus.
And the bone itself, it gives us some clues, right? It wasn't tiny?
Oh no, definitely not tiny. The sources say it was 90 centimeters long. That's, what, nearly 3 feet?
Almost 3 feet for an arm bone.
Yeah, and pretty chunky too. About 33 centimeters wide up near the shoulder, 15 in the middle, and 25 down at the elbow end.
So just from those numbers, you start picturing a pretty large animal. How does that stack up against other sauropods from back then?
That's a really good question. I mean, even that one measurement points to a pretty considerable size. It fits within the range of many sauropods we know from the early Cretaceous. We can't pin down the exact overall size, obviously, not without more bits.
Sure.
But the humerus seems robust,
Mm.
Suggests a big, heavy animal.
Hmm.
Pretty standard for the sauropod look.
And this crucial bone, where is it now? It's not just lost, is it?
Well, part of it might be, but thankfully, the proximal part, the top bit near the shoulder, is safe at the University of Montpellier. It's got a specimen number, BED01.
Okay.
And maybe even more importantly, there's a plaster cast. It's supposed to be of the whole bone, and that's in Paris at the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle. That cast is super valuable, especially if, as it seems, part of the original did get lost over time.
Right. That makes sense. Now, didn't Gervais, when he first described it, didn't he try to link other fossils to it as well?
He did, yeah. Initially, he looked at a conical tooth, some other limb bone fragments found nearby, even some from other places, and thought, maybe these are also Aepisaurus.
That sounds like a reasonable guess at the time.
Oh, absolutely. It's
Yep.
pretty normal in the early days. You find isolated bones, you look around for anything else that might fit. But, as science moves on, as we learn more.
Things get revised.
Exactly, those extra bits. Later on, scientists decided they probably didn't belong to Aepisaurus after all. It just shows how our understanding gets refined, piece by piece.
Okay, let's dive into the classification then. This seems like where things get complicated. Sources often link Aepisaurus to the Titanosauridae family. Why was that the first thought?
Well, if you look at the big picture of sauropod evolution, the Aepisaurus humerus is relatively slender.
Hmm.
And that shape, it shows some similarities to known titanosaurs, like Laplatosaurus.
Ah, okay, so the shape of the bone.
Right, that initial look, the overall morphology, that was the main reason for putting it tentatively in Titanosauridae.
But that wasn't the end of the story, was it? Because then John McIntosh in 1990, he suggested it also looked a bit like Camarasaurus. And even some brachiosaurids. That seems like quite a different direction.
It really does, and it just hammers home how difficult it is when you only have one incomplete bone to work with. McIntosh pointed out some specific details, like maybe muscle scars or certain structural features that reminded him of these other groups. It shows how different types of dinosaurs could end up evolving kind of similar-looking features independently. Convergent evolution, basically, makes classifying from fragments really tough.
And then there's another problem finding the actual bone itself. I read that Jean Leloup in '93 couldn't even track down the original humerus.
Yeah, that's a huge issue in paleontology. We rely on these type specimens, the original fossils used to define a species. If they go missing or you can't get access, well, it really hinders research.
Sure.
Luluf was working from descriptions, and apparently not a very good illustration. Based on that limited info, he basically said, look, based on proportions, it could be a camera sword or it could be a Titanus sword. He couldn't be sure. Still up in the air.
So Episaurus is kind of bouncing around the sauropod family tree. And Macintosh himself, back in that 1990 paper, he ended up calling it Sauropoda inserte sedis. What does that actually mean for us non-Latin speakers?
It basically means sauropod of uncertain placement.
Okay.
It's the scientific way of saying, look, we're pretty sure it's a sauropod, definitely in that big group, but we can't confidently stick it into any specific family or even a smaller subgroup based on what we have. It's an honest admission of uncertainty.
Seems fair enough, given the evidence. And it sounds like others felt the same way. A 2004 review apparently called it a dubious sauropod. Why, dubious? Does that mean they thought it wasn't real?
Not quite, not real. Dubious in this sense, or nomen dubium, means the name itself is questionable because the original material, it's based on that single, partly lost humerus, and maybe the original description isn't good enough to definitively tell it apart from other dinosaurs.
Ah, I see. So it might just be a piece of some other known sauropod, and we can't be sure it deserves its own unique name.
Exactly. There's just not enough diagnostic information in the fossil we have.
But the story keeps going, doesn't it? There was a more recent review, 2022, that suggested it might be an indeterminate eusauropod or neosauropod. How's that different?
Okay, so Eusauropoda and Neosauropoda are like bigger umbrellas within the sauropoda group. They represent the more advanced sauropods.
Right.
So by calling it an indeterminate member of one of those groups, the 2022 review is saying, okay, we still can't put it in a specific family, but we think we can place it broadly within this more derived part of the sauropod family tree. It's a little more specific than just Sauropoda inserte sedis, but that word indeterminate still tells you there's uncertainty.
So, wow. All that debate from one bone. It's still being shifted around. Okay, let's switch gears slightly. What can we actually say about how Aepisaurus lived? Even if we don't know its exact cousins, being a sauropod must tell us something.
It does, absolutely. Even if it's a dubious one, the sauropod classification lets us make some reasonable guesses. We can be pretty confident it was a large animal, walked on four legs.
Quadrupedal.
Quadrupedal, yes. And an herbivore, eating plants. That's the standard sauropod lifestyle. That body plan is built for browsing vegetation.
And when and where was this lofty lizard doing its browsing?
We know that from the rocks it was found in, the Grève Formation in the Vaucluse area of France. Geologists date those rocks to the Albian Age. That's in the early Cretaceous period. So roughly around 100.5 million years ago, it was wandering around what's now France back then.
Okay. Now, you mentioned things get complicated, and it seems like it wasn't just the classification, but the actual, paperwork on this dinosaur got a bit tangled, too.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of funny in a frustrating way for researchers, I imagine. Our sources point out that the name often gets misspelled. Aepisaurus with a Y.
Really?
Yes, and not just randomly. It's shown up that way in major reference books like the Dinosauria, both editions, and in some big review articles, too. It just shows how errors can sneak in and then get repeated.
Wow. That's surprising for such, authoritative sources. And that wasn't the only spelling issue.
Nope. Friedrich von Huene, another big name in paleontology, apparently used Aepisaurus with a Y before the O back in 1932. It's like a game of telephone over the decades.
Paleontological telephone. I like that.
And it gets better. Donald Glut, who wrote those huge dinosaur encyclopedias many of us know.
Oh, yeah, the Glut books.
Right. Well, in his work, not only is the genus name misspelled, Aepisaurus again, but he lists the species name wrong, too. He put A. elephantrus. The correct species name given by Gervais is A. elephantinus.
Elephantinus, not elephantius. These seem like small details, but I guess they can cause real confusion if you're trying to track down information.
They really can, especially when you're cross-referencing different studies or databases. Consistency is key.
And even the year it was described isn't straightforward. Some sources say 1853.
That's another one. Glut says 1853. Some online sources might too. But the Paleobiology database, both editions of the Dinosauria, they correctly cite 1852. That's when Paul Gervais's original paper came out.
Why do these date mistakes happen? Just typos getting copied?
Could be typos, could be misinterpretations of publication dates. Sometimes journals came out later than the year printed on them. Often it's because people rely on secondary sources without double-checking the original publication. That's how errors get cemented in the literature sometimes. It really makes you appreciate careful citation and fact-checking.
It absolutely does. It shows that even in science, you've got to keep untangling these historical threads. Okay, so let's try and wrap up our deep dive into Aepisaurus. We've looked at a dinosaur known from essentially one bone,
Maybe not even a whole bone anymore.
right? A single, partly lost bone. And yet it's caused all these classification headaches and debates that are still kind of simmering.
For me, the real takeaway, the aha moment, is just how much thinking, how much scientific back and forth can come from such incredibly limited evidence. Aepisaurus is just such a great case study. It shows the limits of paleontology, but also the ingenuity, right?
Definitely.
It really highlights that our picture of the past is always being built, always being revised, sometimes based on the tiniest fragments.
And maybe for you listening, think about all the stuff we've talked about today, the debates, the history, the biology, all spinning out from that one humerus found nearly 200 years ago. It makes you realize how every little piece adds to the bigger picture of life on Earth.
Absolutely. Which leads to maybe a final thought to ponder. You have to wonder what other secrets are just sitting there, maybe in museum drawers, in overlooked boxes of fragments. Or what about fossils we haven't even found yet? How could rediscovering that missing piece of the Episaurus humerus, or finding a completely new bone, totally reshape what we think we know about these animals and their world?